Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Daniel Dubois picks up the WBC silver title and defends the WBO international title, blowing away Kyotaro Fujimoto in 2 rounds, and Fujimoto did well to get that far. It was an easy night's work for Daniel Dubois. Crushing right hand ends it. I'll get to the action, but the what next is the more interesting part in some respects, because Joe Joyce may be the next fight for Daniel Dubois. There was some talk after the fight that could get made. I'll get to that, but we'll start with the action proper first. Round 1. Fujimoto is on the move as expected. Dubois tracking forward, tried to catch up with him. A few glancing blows back up Fujimoto. One caught him on the arm, backed him right up. But Dubois was very circumspect, very patient in this round, not rushing things, letting it come to him. And I thought Fujimoto did well to get out of the round, but he was very negative, didn't really throw any punches, and clearly was just trying to survive. And it did look a little bit awkward in there, the height differential, 6'5" versus 6 foot, Fujimoto keeping himself quite low at times in that round, making it awkward for Dubois to catch up with him. Round 2, this is where it all ends, and it actually all started with a jab knockdown. Yes, a jab knockdown. 2 knockdowns in the round. The first was a jab. Fujimoto dropped to the canvas, and at that point there was a certain air of inevitability in this fight. Dubois steps up the aggression afterwards, ups the exchanges, and ultimately he lands a crushing right hand. Fujimoto is knocked into next week, folded up like a cheap suit, and he is down. The fight is waved off. Medics rush in, he's given oxygen, he was down for a couple of minutes, seemingly okay, but they just made sure that he was taken care of. They didn't get him up too quickly. Hopefully Fujimoto is okay, because it was a big right hand, and I think we all knew this was actually going to end that way. And I'd actually seen a poll on Twitter, and I have to mention this. 6% of the people who were polled, this was a who wins this fight and how. 6%, I think it was 4% by KO to Fujimoto and 2% by decision for Fujimoto, which I just thought, who are these people? Have they been following boxing for 3 minutes? It blew my mind. But this was over early as expected, and I said in my pre-fight coverage, I thought it was going to end in a round, but I'd be shocked if it went more than 2 or 3 rounds, because a complete mismatch. Anyone who was trying to talk this up was really kidding themselves, and the WBC came out, talking up Fujimoto as this great heavyweight from Japan, but ultimately he hadn't done anything in years since his knockout loss to Solomon Hamono back in 2012. So this was a mismatch of epic proportions, and it proved that way. And I don't know why people were trying to defend this as a credible fight. It wasn't. It was effectively a stay busy for Daniel Dubois. He picks up the WBC silver title. He will now be ranked rather highly, I would imagine, in that sanctioning body. Currently at 16, sure to rise in the next iteration of the rankings. But then what next is the really interesting part for me in regards to Daniel Dubois, because 5 fights in 2019, you can argue that 3 of them were clear mismatches. The Kajanu one, he should have been able to give Daniel Dubois some rounds, given he'd gone rounds against other guys in the division, including a world title shot with Joseph Parker. He wrecked him. He had a good fight with Nathan Gorman and ultimately dominated him. He's ready for stiffer and sterner tests. No more Fujimotos, no more clear mismatches. At least get some guys like a Christian Hammer, a Johan Dorper, guys that are durable and can go some rounds. They won't necessarily be the most competitive fights in the world, but at least you will know they will come to fight. They've got good chins, and they could actually give Daniel Dubois something to think about for at least 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rounds, whatever. But these guys like Fujimoto, who didn't come to fight, and it basically, the first big punch that landed went down. You got to say, we can't see any more of these. What does Dubois get out of this apart from some of these titles? They've got this whole every belt thing, but it needs to be more about, surely, the development now of him so he's ready when he gets his title shot. And they're talking Joe Joyce now. So the post-fight interview, I'll quickly get to Dubois' thoughts and then on to Warren and Sam Jones, Joe Joyce's manager. They had a bit of a back and forth. So Dubois said after the first couple of shots, he said he just needed to pace himself, just let him come to me. I knew I had the power. I was really confident in what I was going to do tonight. I landed a sweet shot and it was good night. Then he was asked, how far away are you from a world title? And he said, well, if I keep collecting these nice belts, it won't be too far. Needs to get me in a mandatory position, and Frank Warren is going to do his job. He's a great promoter. He's going to pave the way. And Warren, when he was asked about, well, what next for Dubois, he said, I'm doing a big show at the O2 in April, hopefully a big fight for him. He said, and then he went on to say he's made offers to a number of British heavyweights. He referenced Derek Chisora. He said Dubois got no problem fighting Dillian Whyte. And then he mentioned Joe is over there, Joe Joyce. And this is when Sam Jones was brought into the interview. And he was asked, well, will Joe Joyce face Daniel Dubois? And he said, 100%. That's the fight Joe wants. It's what the fans want. Great performance from Daniel tonight. But let's be honest, it was a live sparring session. And I have to agree with that last part. And Warren sort of piped up and said, well, let's make the fight now. Let's get it on. We want it. And actually, I like that fight. Joe Joyce and Daniel Dubois, it's probably the right sort of fight for both these guys at this point in their careers. They've tried to fast track Joe Joyce, and it hasn't quite come off since he started his career back in 2017. They wanted him to really be in world title contention basically after 12 months, 18 months. Hasn't quite panned out this way. He's been a pro for over 2 years now. He's got a good fight coming up in January against Marco Huck. That's not a bad fight at all for a guy with about 10, 11 fights under his belt. But getting him near a world title shot, it really just hasn't panned out the way that they would have wanted it to. So I don't mind this fight at all. They're in the same stable. Presumably it's easy to make. And either guy, if they beat the other, one, they're going to get a very good win, but two, propel themselves much higher up rankings, but also potentially into a much bigger and better fight after that. And of the fights that can be made that are available to both guys at the moment, say Joyce gets past Marco Huck, Daniel Dubois is as good a fight that could be out there for Joe Joyce at this point, and seemingly also for Dubois, and they're in the same stable. Let's hope that they do make that. If not for April, some point in 2020, because it seems like a natural fight for them to make, with the winner going on to higher honours. But if they do have this big card in April at the O2, let's hope it's a much bigger and better name for Daniel Dubois to run out against. If not Joe Joyce, someone that can actually take him some rounds. One of the best things that happened to Daniel Dubois in his career was that stinker against Kevin Johnson, because it showed Daniel Dubois that he couldn't just knock everyone out with, a couple of right hands, and that some guys can take his power, they can take him the distance, and he did look decidedly average at times in that fight. And since that win, and it was a pretty comfortable win, it just wasn't a, very pretty fight. He has actually come on in leaps and bounds, especially with his variation of punches. He's actually working a lot better now than he once was. So it was a good win in the context of his career for a learning fight. And I don't know why he can't get a few more of those learning fights instead of some of these knockover jobs. But let's hope 2020, better caliber of opponents, and hopefully that Joe Joyce fight. But what did you make of it all? Predictably, Kyotaro Fujimoto is knocked out. Hopefully he's okay. Daniel Dubois moves on. He's got the WBC silver title now. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.